Hello, everybody. My name is David Keck, and this is Surviving Abuse Podcast.
I don't understand why it was me. I don't know if I'll ever be the same. Is the same what I want anyway? You took what I thought I could never get back. I quit holding on to the anger. I broke down just to begin again. Won't let you win any longer. I'm back. Taking the good, kissing the bad goodbye. Now I'm back, and I'll pray for you. I'm done hurting. I quit holding on to the anger. Won't let you win any longer. Then we begin again. Now I'm back, and I'll pray for you. I'm done hurting.
Hi, Kiana.
Hi, David.
We re-released the episode where we covered the documentary Procession, and then we released the episode where we had Mike Foreman on. And so today we're actually doing another episode with Mike Foreman to discuss the two letters, because we really thought that we needed to go into a little bit more detail and have a designated time, I guess, to talk about these.
Well, yes, and a better understanding, because I know when I originally read the first one in particular, I was concerned and a little bit appalled based off of some of the things that were in that particular letter, and the fact that you were sending this to someone who has been a victim of abuse. So yes, I would definitely like to get Mike's thoughts on these letters and to dissect them a little more.
Well, and speaking of you being appalled, that'll be a great time to bring in Mike Foreman, because he was also appalled by these letters. So, Mike, how are you today?
Oh, pretty good. How are you guys doing?
Good. I'm so glad that you're with us again. Before we get started, though, I want to ask you, what are your thoughts on the release of your first interview with us?
I'm really helping me out from a therapeutic standpoint, having that release. It's just, for me to listen to that, I know it's not this way for other people, but when I listen to it, for me, it's just very unburdening, because this is what they did.
And I think that's important that people hear that. I think other individuals who have went through something similar, I think if they were to get a chance to say what they really mean and how they feel without judgment, I think they would feel the same way that you feel.
Absolutely. There's no doubt. Now, when I got this letter, before we talk about this letter, I'd just like to just quickly say that I had already gone to the Independent Review Board. I had told them about my story. And when Archbishop Nauman wrote me this letter, he knew I was telling the truth, and this is how I know this, just quickly. Number one, the only way I could know where the rental house was by being there, because this priest wasn't even at our parish. He was clear across town in Shawnee. And number two, I had that detail where the priest, after he assaulted me, he handed me a pillow shaped like a ball bat, and he laid in a fetal position on the floor and told me to beat him with it because it would get out my anger. Well, and then after I got this letter, I got in touch with a local attorney, and she said that several other victims had reported the same detail. Then a couple years after I got this letter, my local lawyer here, Rebecca Randall, she read a statement to me in her office from one of the same priest's other victims. And when she was reading exactly what he did to this other victim, I interrupted her and I said, "That's me. That's me right there." So there's just absolutely no doubt in my mind that when Nauman wrote me this letter, he knew damn well that I was telling the truth. There's just no two ways about that, okay? So I get this letter. I meet with the Independent Review Board on September 18th, 2013, and then almost 3 long months later, I get this letter dated December 6th, 2013. Got the Archdiocese of Kansas City, Kansas on the letterhead, I guess you'd say. And here's how this letter starts out from Archbishop Joseph Nauman. Dear Mr. Foreman, I am very sorry to hear of your experience with Father Finian Meese. Right there, he's like, in my opinion, he's saying that he believes me right off the bat. He's very sorry to hear about this.
I mean, that's what I took from that too. Is like basically he's acknowledging that you had
Right.
an experience that was not, obviously it was bad enough that he would apologize for it.
Well, and it's almost, I mean, at least the first several lines when I was first reading it, I was like, oh, this guy's on Mike's side, because even when it says that it is inexcusable.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought when I read the first sentence.
Yeah.
And another thing about that first sentence, he has, as I mentioned in that earlier podcast, arch asshole Joseph Nauman has the whole file on Finney and Meese. This guy was just disgusting. I mean, he was just he left a ton of victims in his wake. He's got victims spread out all over the country right now, even though he died in '97. And so arch asshole knows how evil this fucking guy was, and he still right off the bat calls him father. Father Finney and Meese. And this Finney and Meese was actually laicized by the Vatican, which means he was kicked out of the Catholic Church by the Vatican, by the Pope. And please don't misunderstand that. I have no respect for the Pope whatsoever. But this is how they knew all about this guy, and Archbishop Nauman still calls him father. Then the second sentence is, it is inexcusable that a member of the clergy, religious order, a church staff member, or volunteer should ever harm a child in any manner. See, now right there, he's veering ever so slightly off course. This is about Catholic priests, but he's trying to fog it up with, he says, it's inexcusable that a member of the clergy, religious order, a church staff member, or a volunteer. He's lumping church staff members and volunteers in with these pedophile priests. So he's just slightly veering off course. This is about Catholic priests, not staff members, not volunteers. Okay, and then the next sentence. God damn it. My responsibility as Archbishop is to do everything that is reasonably possible to provide safe environments for all children who are entrusted to our care for the sake of faith formation, education, extracurricular recreation, or child care. He says, to all children who are entrusted to our care. That just makes me sick to my inner core, just right there. And then he says, for the sake of faith formation. Now, I unfortunately grew up Catholic, and here's what my faith formation was like for me from the Catholic Church, and at the strong encouragement of my parents, because they both went through this fucking nonsense when they were 5 years old starting, and so did my grandparents, and so on and so on. Well, when I was about 5 years old, I was taught by the Catholic Church that I had committed a horrible sin just by being born. I think they called that the original sin. And they told me when I was 5 that I had committed this horrible sin by being born. And if I don't start eating Jesus Christ's body at Mass and buy into all this nonsense, I'm going to burn in a lake of fire forever. Now, I was exposed to their faith formation beginning around age 5, and my first communion, or the first time I ate Jesus Christ's body, was when I was in the 2nd grade. So when I was taught this ridiculous, I think it's fucking child abuse to teach a 5-year-old that kind of crap. I was taught this shit starting when I was 5 that I had committed this horrible sin. Oh, let me back up. So I committed this horrible sin by being born. And then they taught me beginning when I was 5 years old that Jesus Christ, thousands of years ago, he died a horrible, very painful, slow death, nailed by his hands and feet, nailed to a cross because of and for me. That's what I was taught when I was 5, that Jesus did that for me and because of me. And if I don't start eating his body and buying this nonsense, then I'll go to hell forever. That right there is absolutely fucking ridiculous, isn't it?
Well, and here's the thing that also concerns me about all of that, Mike, to be honest with you. So you have somebody who didn't ask to be on this earth, right? So your parents, they got together, they had this child. You have sinned simply because your parents chose to bring you here into this world. Like that to me is a bit concerning. I have a hard time believing that it's a sin just to be born, right?
Exactly, and not just a sin, a huge sin. And let
Well,
me
and
let
to
me
me
point this out.
that makes me think that are they saying that they believe in that you pick your life? Because if you choose to be born, then that means you had to be a creation before you were actually born, right?
I mean, yeah, like it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make logical sense.
Yeah.
That you would go
Well,
ahead. I'm sorry.
anyway, so having said all that, what they taught me beginning when I was 5 years old. At the time when I was 5 years old, when I was exposed to their faith formation, how ridiculous that all that is. That at that time when I was 5, I still believed in Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, trick or treating, and the Tooth Fairy. That's where my mind was. And at the time, I remember this like it was yesterday. I can remember back then when I was about 5 or 6 years old, when I was exposed to all this ridiculous shit, that at that time, I truly, in my mind, truly believed that the old original Batman TV show, I thought that was deadly serious. And where my mind, when I'm that impressionable, and my mind is right, still believing in Santa and all that, that's when they teach you this shit. And I heard a psychologist on TV several years ago say that the human mind is not fully developed until someone's in their mid to late 20s. So I've pictured this hypothetical before. Imagine somehow that somebody lives in our society just the way it is, except for one thing. Somehow he's not exposed to any religion at all until he's 27 years old. He hasn't heard any of this. So when he's 27 and his mind is fully developed, then the Catholic Church, he checks into the Catholic Church because he wants to know if he wants to be Catholic. Now he's looking into this stuff. And the Catholic Church says, okay, well, when you were born, you committed a horrible sin just by being born. And if you don't, believe all this nonsense and that Jesus died a horrible death because of you, Jesus suffered directly because of you, and all of the rest of that. If you told that to that 27-year-old that had no exposure to this nonsense until his mind was fully developed, he would be rolling on the floor laughing his ass off. And then when he got done laughing, he would say, no, thank you. Some guy thousands of years ago died on a cross for me and my future sins. Are you fucking people nuts? Jesus. That's just my opinion.
Well,
So
no,
that's what I
I
think
do think you bring up an interesting point, though, because you're right. So we do have 5-year-olds who are introduced to all these things that we know are not real, right? Like you mentioned Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, all of these things. It does beg the question of, if you're going to introduce religion, and I will tell you that I am someone who is somewhat religious. I'm not a practicing, in church every Sunday individual, but it does beg the question, when should, religion be introduced? Should we really be forcing, children to learn certain things? Okay, fine. The U.S. is by whole, the majority, Christianity lives here, right? But if it was some other religion, people would be throwing a fit. The question
People be
begs,
what?
I said, if someone was teaching their child a different religion, right? So, because you know how we are in the U.S., right? We're a majority Christians here. So, but if you started teaching your child a different religion other than Christianity, people are up in arms. So, what's the difference?
It's that I know, and see part of the problem. It's just a continuing cycle. Is my parents. They were good parents. They were decent people. The church did this at the urging of my parents because they went through this shit when they were 5.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And my grandparents when they were 5, and so on and so on. And speaking of Christianity, several years ago I saw this show on the TV about how they did a show about the Quran, and I guess that's the Muslim Bible, I guess, so to speak.
Which is
And
hilarious.
there's some brutal shit in the Quran.
Mm-hmm.
But then on the show they said, but in all fairness, we're going to look into at the Holy Bible for a minute here. And in the Holy Bible, I didn't even look this up. I just took their word for us because I'm not a Bible guy at all. For me, the Bible was written by humans. I mean, that's a fact. It was written by humans, and these humans, they couldn't possibly know any more about a higher power than you or me or anyone else. Well, in this one section of the Bible, they said it's called Leviticus,
Oh
whatever the fuck
goodness,
that
yes.
is.
There's
But in
it's one of the
Leviticus,
first five.
in the wonderful Holy Bible, it says that all non-believers should be killed. It also says that all homosexuals should be killed, dead. Well, I am a non-believer, and one of my brothers is gay. So the wonderful, almighty, holy Bible says that I should be killed, and one of my brothers should be killed. So I have zero respect for the Holy Bible that, again, was written by humans.
Kind of go back to the point that you were talking about the Quran versus, the Bible, and the brutality of it. Because again, and I will tell you again, I am a believer, but not to the extent that some people do, right? Like I don't look at the Bible and say, oh my God, everything in it is absolutely 100% correct, simply because, like you said, like you so rightly said, it was written by men, and it's been translated and retranslated how many different times?
Well, and
And
also too, the Bible is full of fables. There's stories to teach lessons. I don't think that my family abused me for me believing in Santa Claus, but I could see how someone that went through something like you did as a child could think that any lie was a part of abuse because all your safe places were gone. And I think that's the difference.
Well, and I think that's, again, going back to what we were just saying. It's like, at what point do you introduce
Right.
these things, because the Bible is very complex anyway, right? There's a lot of stuff in there that as a child, there's no way I would have understood. Even as a
Right.
fable, I wouldn't have understood it. So then you're feeding this thing to a child who just does not have the mental capacity or capability of really understanding what's being taught. They don't know the difference that, hey, this is a fable or this is a parable versus whatever. You're teaching them, you're indoctrinating them from a very early age that this is truth, this is gospel, every single thing in this is true, whether it's meant to be a parable or not. And to Mike's point, that being said, when you're indoctrinating a child to that from very early on, and you're telling them that this is truth, this is gospel, and the people who are teaching you this, you're also taught that, hey, they're next to God. Well, you're already putting this child at a disadvantage, especially when it comes to standing up for themselves, or for even, reaching out to say, hey, this bad thing happened to me.
Yeah. I appreciate how my family introduced God to me. They introduced him to me through different churches and told me to find which way I felt comfortable, and that was my pick. Like, I got to build my own relationship with God. It wasn't organized by my family, and
very
I
fortunate.
appreciated that.
Yeah.
They didn't say we are Southern Baptists and this is what we believe and here's the rules and take this as it is. They were saying, hey, here is this higher power. This is what we believe. This is what your mom believes. This is what your grandparents believe. Let's explore all those options with you and find what you believe.
Right. And see, but this is where I think, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is where the Catholic Church has so much more power.
Yeah.
Right? Because instead of having that, oh, hey, you figure it out, no, this is what it is what it is. What I tell you is truth. This is what you have to do.
They have to teach you this ridiculous nonsense when you're 5. I mean, that's just to me. I don't give a shit if Catholics are offended or not. And the whole thing is, when you're 5 years old, you're threatened with an eternity in hell if you don't go along with this crap. And one last thing about the Bible, a friend of mine, he hates the Catholic Church, but he's still very religious. And we've had this kind of friendly, long-standing debate about the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I say, dude, Bible was written by humans. And those humans that wrote the Bible, they couldn't know any more about a higher power or an afterlife than you or me or anyone else. And his response to that is, I know, Mike, I know it was written by humans, but it was inspired by God. And then, of course, I say the obvious, according to who? according to the people who wrote it. And the people who wrote it say, if you don't believe this, you're going to go to hell and burn. You're going to die and burn in hell. That's another thing. All non-believers go straight to hell in the Bible. That's what I've been told. So, I mean, that would be like if you went into a car dealership and the salesman said, if you don't buy what I'm selling, you're going to rot in hell forever. You know how ridiculous that would seem to you? Well, that's what they're telling you with this shit. When you're 5, if you don't believe this, all this crap, you're going to burn in a lake of fire forever. So then, okay, we'll get back to the letter here. The last sentence we went over is he does everything reasonably possible for all children who are entrusted to our care for the sake of faith formation. Oh, my God. Education, extracurricular recreation, or child care. People entrust these assholes with the care of their children. That just really makes me fucking sick. The next sentence, I am firmly committed to enforcement of our safe environment policy, which provides for training, awareness, best practices, reporting, and investigating of any allegations of abuse or misbehavior. His safe environment policy, remember in the last podcast, I talked about the safe environment coordinator who just lies and lies, he just fucking lies. All this talk about the safe environment policy, they provide training and best aware and reporting and investigation of any allegations. They investigated me. There's no doubt in my mind they know goddamn well I'm telling the truth, and they cover me up and lie about my allegations. And then this last sentence of the first paragraph really fucking pisses me off because, you know, they love the statute of limitations, right? They've spent tens of millions of dollars lobbying to keep it firmly in place. They hid behind the statute of limitations against my lawsuit for 3.5 horrible years. The last sentence of the first paragraph, there's 4 paragraphs. It's not that long of a letter. I am also firmly committed to investigating any allegation of abuse of a minor made against any member of the clergy or any church employee or volunteer, no matter, this is the worst part, no matter the age of the incident or the current age of the victim. So here again, Joseph, he's just so sneaky. He's trying to veer ever slightly off course by including church employees or volunteers. No, Joseph, this is about Catholic fucking priests. Forget about the church employees and volunteers. See, he's just real sneaky. And then he says, no matter the age of the incident or the current age of the victim. After he wrote me this and said that to me, then he screamed in court for 3.5 years, statute of limitations, statute of limitations. He paid several $100,000 to hide behind the statute of limitations. And in this letter, he righteously says, no matter the age of the incident or the current age of the victim. That's just a filthy, despicable fucking lie by his own actions. He's saying no matter the age of the incident or the current age of the victim. I come forward, he's screaming statute of limitations. He screamed that and paid hundreds of thousands of dollars over 3.5 years every day. So that's just another fucking lie. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, his interest was more in protecting himself and his organization. He had no, based off of this, the fact that you would say have a responsibility, right, to investigate this, regardless of the age, but then you go around and you turn around and you let your lawyers say, hey, we're going to give you, because even if you didn't know the statutes of limitations existed, and your lawyers say, hey, well, we can use this against them. If you were really truly after the truth, if you were really truly into helping the victims of something so horrendous, then you would tell your lawyers, no, we don't want to go down that route. We want to make sure that this victim is taken care of.
And to what you just said just there, in I think it was the first story I did on KCTV5, which is in my website. I believe I haven't watched it in quite a while because it's so infuriating. But I believe my lawyer said in that story about the church, what we have here is not a search for the truth; it's a search for a defense. That's perfect. So that's just a blatant, and the word blatant. The word blatant always comes to mind because it's just so despicable. No matter the age of the incident or the current age of the victim, that was his whole defense against me for my whole fucking lawsuit. And about that, so I blocked this out of my mind till I was almost 50 years old. Well, I believe that was the worst part of all of this for me because I was living with the effects of this shit without knowing why. So I just thought, this is just who I am. I felt bad about myself for decades, and I just thought, this is just who I am. Well, when Archbishop Naumann used the statute against me for 3.5 years, he was using the worst part of all of this, the fact that I blocked it out of my mind. He used the worst part of all of this against me in court to cause me a great deal of additional suffering. And he's saying no matter the age of the incident or current age of the victim. He used the worst part of all this against me for more suffering. Then we'll move on to the second paragraph. I appreciate your willingness to bring our attention to your claims against Finney and Meese. We take these issues very seriously and investigate them as thoroughly as possible according to the provisions of the archdiocesan policy. So they don't investigate shit. They knew I was telling the truth. They just lied about their investigation. And then he says, this is about the only morsel of truth in this whole fucking letter, this next sentence. Your candid conversations with Father John Riley, Special Auditor Curry Myers, he was the independent investigator who taught a criminal justice class at Catholic Benedictine College. He's the independent investigator. And your meeting with, I'll start over. Your candid conversations with Father John Riley, Special Auditor Curry Myers, and your meeting with the Independent Review Board have been helpful in understanding your allegation and arriving at a conclusion regarding this matter. When he says your candid conversations, my candid conversations with the Independent Review Board, they were very candid, to say the least. Fuck. And then he says...
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, and I still don't understand. I mean, I know we talked about this last time, and even reading this, like, why do you have someone even affiliated with Catholic anything doing the investigation?
I know, it's fucking, but he says it's all independent of the church, so it's like a double fucking lie. He just fucking lie. And then this really irks me because I know how evil and filthy this motherfucker is. Excuse me. The last sentence of the second paragraph, he says, oh God, this is so filthy. We take the additional precaution of reporting allegations to local law enforcement as well. Now, right there, that's just a fucking smokescreen of deception because he's implying that he wants justice. That's why he's into local law enforcement, and that couldn't be farther from the truth.
So here's the thing. So there's two ways that you could read that, right? So yes, you could read it as we're implying that we're looking for justice for you, but you can also read that almost as a threat. So I think historically speaking, a lot of individuals, especially individuals who have dealt with victims of abuse, they know that they are hesitant to report certain things to law enforcement.
That's a good point. Yeah, and it's exactly what you just said. Plus, you could use the word intimidation.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God! Now I'm going to be put under a microscope by local law enforcement, and it's a total lie. He's implying he wants justice, and he's a snake. He wants the exact opposite of justice. And then, okay, the next paragraph, this is just fucking horrible, man. I remember the kick in the gut when I got this letter, when I read this. And this is all a blatant fucking lie. Based on my careful review of the extensive report provided to me by the Independent Review Board, I agree with their conclusion that we are unable to substantiate your credibility, the credibility of your claims against Finney and Meese. That right there is a complete lie, just a flat-out lie. Because before we started this, I explained how they know I'm telling the truth, those details. And he's saying we cannot substantiate your credibility. That's just a blatant, flat-out lie. I think in my story, I might have said, I haven't read that in a while because it's so infuriating for me to even read that. I think I said, now, Joseph, when you were lying about my credibility in writing to me, Did you report that to local law enforcement, Joseph? And then he says, this is really disgusting. I mentioned this in the first podcast. I have forwarded the findings of our independent review board. That's the third time he's said that by name, and we know how ridiculous that is. I have forwarded the findings of our independent review board to the superior of the Capuchin province of Mid-America, Brother Christian Popovac, for review and consideration. So he reached out to them, as I already explained, and lied to them about my credibility. He took the initiative and reached out and told them I have no credibility when he knows I do.
I think this was the part of the letter that infuriated me the most, because if this other place has their own, this Capuchin province of Mid-America, if they have their own process and procedures, I feel like this is a way to muddy the waters for that investigation. And that's the thing that, I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, it just aggravated me that they would even reach out and do that. Like, they don't need to go into an investigation already leaning toward
not
whatever
just do that, but he reached out and also to tell me that. When he told me that, again, he knows I'm telling the truth, and he reached out to Capuchins and told them I have no credibility. And, you know, I think maybe in my story I also said this when I pointed that out. So he reached out to the Capuchins. There's no doubt about this, in my opinion, and fucking lied his ass off about my credibility. Now, Joseph, did you reach out and immediately tell law enforcement about that lie? Huh? You filthy fucking piece of shit. I bet he didn't. You know, he's Mr. Law Enforcement. He's lying to another responsible party. And he's trying to act like he's Mr. Law Enforcement. It's a fucking snake. Then it says the province has its own procedures of reviewing claims against its members and will view the information I have forwarded to them.
Which is crazy to me. Why are you reviewing information that someone else has forwarded? Why aren't you doing your own investigation?
Right, and Archbishop, he tries to come off as Mr. Caring, Mr. Humanitarian, Mr. Decency, and when he forwarded the information, he told them that I have no credibility. He's just a fucking liar. He fucking lies his ass off. And I really want to ask him if he told law enforcement about that lie. And then it says, I presume they will communicate with you directly. So then, just in quick review, he knows I'm telling the truth. He knows this has horribly affected and infected my whole fucking life. And at the end of the letter, he says, this is so arrogant, I can't even fucking believe it. I do realize that my conclusion is not what you had hoped to receive, but my sincere prayer and hope is that despite this conclusion, you are able, through God's abundant and unfailing grace, to experience healing and peace in your life. Well, first of all, what exactly are you praying that I experience healing and peace from? You just said I have no credibility. What are you praying that I heal from then, fuckhead?
Well, yeah, absolutely. It just doesn't make any sense. This letter is just a big letter of contradictories, right? We started at the beginning acknowledging basically that something happened to you. And then
exactly.
And then we get toward the end of this and you're like, oh, well, you have no credibility. Oh, but then again, well, we hope you heal.
And then the worst, we hope we heal for nothing that happened to you. And the worst part of this whole letter for me is this senior Catholic Archbishop, in that last paragraph, he's clearly lying about his own sincere prayer. Because he's covering me up, he's reaching out to the Capuchins to make sure I receive no justice out there, and then after he told me that it's his sincere prayer that I experience healing and peace in my life, he reaches out and lies to the Capuchins. Then he spent several $100,000 in legal fees to use the statute against me. And the whole time he was doing that, according to this letter, the whole time he was using the statute against me for 3.5 horrible years to saddle me with painfully blatant injustice for the rest of my life. The whole time he was doing that, he says that it was his sincere prayer the whole time that I experienced healing.
How exactly does he expect you to get that healing, with the torment of all of this?
Oh, it's just beyond despicable. And then so this letter is just packed full of lies. And the bullshit about local law enforcement, we take the precaution of reporting allegations to local law enforcement. That's just nothing but just a foggy deception of fucking lies. He acts like he's Mr. Law Enforcement. He's a snake down in the fucking sewer, is what he is. And then he signs off on this letter, sincerely yours in Jesus, the Lord of life. So he attaches Jesus Christ's name to the end of this despicable letter full of lies. What a fucking piece of shit he is. So after this letter came out, after I got this letter, then I got in touch with this local attorney, and she filed a lawsuit on my behalf. And then in 2015, and so that was in March of 2014, she filed the lawsuit. March of 2015, we had a dismissal hearing because the church was kind of trying to hide behind the statute, and the judge refused to dismiss it on the first dismissal hearing. So a couple months after that, the church requested another dismissal hearing, which means months and months and fucking months of additional mental and emotional awful distress. So we have a second dismissal hearing scheduled for August 27th of 2015. Well, the movie Spotlight was on the horizon, so arch asshole Joseph Nauman organized these ridiculous healing services in Kansas City, called the Hope Services, healing our parishes through empathy. And when I saw this in the newspaper, I was 2 weeks away from my second dismissal hearing. Oh my God, I'll just read you a little bit of this article. It's in the Kansas City Star, August 12, 2015. The Catholic Diocese of Kansas City, St. Joseph, is apologizing to victims of priest sexual abuse and inviting them to a series of prayer and healing services that start tonight. The move drew mixed reviews from those abused by clergy, some saying it was too little too late. This is how soft the press can be on the fucking scuzzy-ass church. In 2008, they noted then Bishop Robert Finn issued a public apology to victims as part of a $10 million settlement. But last year, they said when victims asked for a similar apology to be part of a $9.95 million settlement in another case, the diocese refused. Last week, the diocese sent letters from Archbishop Joseph Nauman and placed ads in local media to let those directly or indirectly affected by any form of sexual abuse to let them know that they were welcome to attend the services. Nauman, the Archdiocese of Kansas City in Kansas, has been the Kansas City St. Joseph Diocese Apostolic Administrator since Finn resigned in April. And they just failed to mention Finn resigned in April because he ignored graphic child porn on one of his priest's computers.
Oh, dear.
And he actually pled guilty to that in court. And after he pled guilty to that, the Vatican allowed him to remain the bishop for 2 or 3 more years. And the Vatican knew that Finn knew about this graphic porn on this priest's computer. It was so bad, the priest got 50 years in prison for it. And Finn, he knew that this priest had access to very respectful and trusting parents and their children. And he said nothing. And the Vatican knows all about that. They allowed him to remain the bishop, and they say he resigned, but they really forced him to resign because the movie Spotlight was on the horizon. So they forced him to resign, and then they whisked him away and hid him in a small town in Italy. That's how despicable these fucking people are. Back to the newspaper. The first service to be held by Nauman is at 7 p.m. today at the St. Thomas More Catholic Church at 822 Holmes Road. Several other services will follow over the next 10 months at parishes in the diocese, leading up to the lamination service on June 26, 2016 at the Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception. The Hope Services, healing our parishes through empathy. This is just despicable. Well, let me stop for just a second. So when Nauman led the first Hope service, that evil son of a bitch was at the front of a Catholic church. And at the front of Catholic churches, there's a large statue of Jesus Christ nailed to a cross. That fucking asshole Nauman, he stood under the statue of Jesus Christ, dressed in one of his colorful archbishop costumes, and he fucking lied and flat out fucking lied his ass off about healing, mercy, and empathy. And those statues of Jesus Christ nailed to the cross at the front of the church that he was standing underneath, usually in those statues, I believe in the statue, Jesus Christ, his head is bowed down, so he's looking down. So the statue was looking down at Naaman while he's just blatantly lying his fucking ass off. Then it says the Hope Services healing our parishes through empathy are being held. I mean, see, all Catholics are reading this, and they're just, this is just such a deception and fucking lies. It's disgusting.
Well,
The Hope Services.
I wonder too, like as I'm listening to you read this, right? And again, I'm not a victim of abuse of any in any manner, right? Like my religious experience is much different than yours. But I can't imagine being someone who was abused, someone who went through something so horrendous, especially as a child, and to see that in the paper and not feel like this is a big slap in the face.
Oh my God, when I read this article, I remember this. I was staying in a deck. I was working all day. I come home about 6:30 that night, just dead tired, and I'm thinking about my lawsuit the whole day, every minute of the day. And when I get home, there's a message from my dad on my phone, and he says, "Mike, I probably shouldn't tell you about this, but you're going to know it anyway, so I'm going to tell you. There's an article in the Kansas City Star about Archbishop Naaman, and you're not going to like it." So before I even showered or anything, I went straight up to the convenience store and got this newspaper and read it. Because of the way I've been treated by Naaman, and then this is what he's saying to the whole Kansas City area. The Hope Services healing our parishes through empathy are being held in connection with the Jubilee Year of Mercy announced by Pope Francis in April. In a document proclaiming the Jubilee, the pontiff said the church's very credibility is seen in how she shows merciful and compassionate love. That's just, and Catholics read that and they believe that shit. Merciful and compassionate love. Arch filth rat Joseph Naaman, lied about my credibility, reached out to another responsible party, lied to them about it, and then spent all that money hiding behind the statute for 3.5 years. Is that merciful and compassionate love? No. Fucking assholes. God damn, these people suck. And then a little bit ways down in the same article, diocesan spokesman Jack Smith said Naaman sent the letter. See, Naaman sent these letters to people who had already settled. That's in the front page of this. So it says, spokesman Jack Smith said Naaman sent the letters to dozens of plaintiffs in the sexual abuse lawsuits that resulted in the multi-million-dollar settlements in 2008 and 2014. So I kind of touched on this in the earlier podcast. See, Naaman, the letter that he sent the dozens of victims, he was just using them as pawns because they had all settled. And in his letter, and this is in the paper, in his letter, Naaman, and picture how this made me feel when he's going out of his way to make this so much worse for me. And at the time of this article, he had been going out of his way and making this so much more painful and worse for me for, at the time, the last 20 months. So the article then says, in his letter, Naaman apologizes to the victim, in quotation marks. I am so sorry for what happened to you. So this is part of the letter, but this is in the Star, so he's telling the entire Kansas City area this. I am so sorry for what happened to you, and I realize that no words are likely to heal your wounds, Naaman wrote. As a small step towards reconciliation, I apologize on behalf of all of the priests of this diocese and all the members of our Catholic Church for the terrible hurt you have suffered at the hands of someone entrusted with your spiritual care. And this is really despicable. I truly regret how deeply this has impacted your life and the lives of your family and family members and friends, as well as your relationship to the church. So he's saying how when he'd been causing a great deal of additional mental and emotional distress and agony and suffering for me for at the time the last 20 months, he's saying how he truly regrets this. Fucking lies. And he says, your actions have led to permanent changes in the way our diocese handles matters related to abuse, adding that the diocese was working hard to prevent sexual abuse by screening, educating, supervising all priests and others who have contact with children and youth. He doesn't mean a fucking word of that. Those are all just fucking lies, flat out lies. He went out of his way, caused me so much more agony. And when he says that, when that letter, when he says, I truly regret how deeply this has impacted your life, there should be no doubt in anyone's mind. So those people that settled, they're all in Missouri. And the statute in Missouri is not nearly as bad as in Kansas. So if those people would have been assaulted in Kansas and they went to his diocese like I did, he would have kicked them in the teeth just like he was doing to me for, at the time, the last 20 months. So when he says, I truly regret, that's a blatant fucking lie. He would have used the statute against them till the end of time if he could have, but they were in Missouri. Another thing that makes this so fucking unfair, I was told that, see, I was assaulted in Kansas. I'm in Kansas City, so the state line, Kansas and Missouri. I was assaulted about, I'm just guessing, about 3 to 4 miles west of the Kansas-Missouri state line in Kansas. If I would have been assaulted like 3 or 4 miles to the east where I was assaulted, then I could have had a lawsuit.
Wow.
But since I was in Kansas instead of Missouri, I'm denied any and all justice that's even possible. He goes on to say, Nauman says, and this is all Catholics are reading this, and they're very impressed by this. We immediately report every credible allegation of abuse to law enforcement authorities and remove any person credibly accused from public ministry. Now, right there, that's a fucking lie. And here's what he says. We remove every credible. Well, no, we immediately report every credible allegation.
So who's making the determination of what's credible or not? They shouldn't be making that determination on what gets reported to law enforcement. It should, if anybody makes a claim, that should have been reported, not who you believe is credible or not.
Right, and I touched on this in the earlier podcast. We know for a fact that they lie and cover this up in every city around the world. And then again, I touched on this earlier in the last podcast. We will remove any person. See, he didn't say priest. He's back to the church employees and the volunteers. No, it's Catholic priests, Joseph. Say it. Because we remove any person credibly accused. Who in the fuck is this evil snake to decide what allegations are credible?
Exactly.
That is so insulting and infuriating to me. I can't even breathe.
Exactly. And that's what I don't understand about all of this. So how are you determining what's credible and not credible? Because if you're the one that's making that determination, that should never happen. It should immediately be turned over to law enforcement.
Exactly. And worldwide, and right here in Kansas City too, they have a horrible, horrible track record of covering this up and lying about this shit. And to use the word credible, credibly accused, they told me in that letter that they could not substantiate my credibility. So when I hear them talking about lists of credibly accused priests, that's like they're like twisting a large knife of blatant injustice deep into my inner core. They're talking about credibly accused.
Oh, yeah, you're pretty much saying that your story is false, you're a liar, but if they come across one that's true, they'll consider it.
Right, well, see, that credibly allegations, see, Catholics, they're loving this shit. And they don't know that credible to Archbishop Nauman, I am very credible. And he told me I have no credibility. So when I hear and read credibly accused priests coming from the church, that just makes me sick because I know the truth. I'm as credible as they come, and they said I had no credibility. So credibly accused, that's a fancy way of saying there's other priests, but we're not going to tell you about those. Now, when I came forward, Nauman reached out to the Capuchins and lied to them. He went out of his way to make sure, I hate to keep beating this dead horse, to make sure that I didn't get a gallon of gas to even get to therapy. He wanted to make sure that I didn't get a paper clip for my therapy receipts. I mean, he didn't want me to have a breath of oxygen. And the next paragraph of this article that's, for the whole Kansas City area, Nauman said the diocese offered counseling and other resources to sexual abuse victims and provided contact information for those who wanted assistance. He went out of his way to block any assistance for me. I got the exact opposite. Not only did I get zero assistance, I got a lot more pain and suffering. So that's just another lie. And the Catholics all over Kansas City, they're thinking this Naaman is just a saint. Look, he's providing, resources. Then after that, he said an independent counselor would be available during and after each Hope session, along with the staff from the diocese's office of Child and Youth Protection. He said an independent counselor. So based on my experience, I have to assume that this independent counselor is a fucking Catholic priest wearing Catholic priest clothing. Remember the Catholic priest that was on my independent review board? That was so insulting to me. And, it's like they went out of their way to insult me because, that fucking priest, he could have at least been wearing, like jeans and a sweatshirt. He's wearing the black Catholic priest clothing with the white collar. I mean, just pissing all over me. And then along with the staff from the Diocese Office of Child and Youth Protection. What other organization on planet Earth has an Office of Child and Youth Protection? This is Catholic Church. They're supposed to be holy and wonderful and everything. And I equate this to this in my story. They have it's ridiculous. The church has victim assistant coordinators and a child and youth protection office. Well, that's like, in swimming pools and beaches have lifeguards because people drown. Well, the Catholic Church has victim assistant coordinators and offices of child and youth protection because in the Catholic Church, children are raped. And the only I know this in my heart from the way I was dealt with. These victim assistant coordinators, they don't give a fuck about these victims. Their only job is to assess their next lawsuit. Based on their own actions, they could not care any less about victims. This whole letter is just nothing but public relations. It's all it is. Just
and
disgusting.
that's what I was thinking too. So I'm looking at this, and you're saying that this was actually posted in the newspaper, correct?
Yeah.
Why does the church need PR? The church shouldn't need PR. If you're honest,
could you imagine how I felt? I was. Naaman had been going out of his way to make this so much worse for me for, at the time, 20 months, day and night. This is with me every minute of the day and night. And now I'm reading this. The whole Kansas City area is reading this about Joseph and his deep desire for the healing and law enforcement. That was so horrible for me. Oh man, that was brutal. That was one of the worst days of this whole thing for me.
I'm sure, and I still I'm still stuck. I will say I'm still stuck on that whole credible line because it's like, who are you to determine what's credible and what's not? Like
exactly. Especially, put yourself in my shoes. If you heard the credibly accused list of priests and anybody that's credibly accused according to the church, look how they treated. They knew I was credible, and they shit down my throat for 3.5 years. They're acting like if it's credible, then they're going to do the right thing. And that's just a fucking lie. These people are...
And what I hate, too, is using words like that on a public platform is part of what keeps sexual assault abuse victims from, coming and telling someone because, we all fear, are they going to believe us? Are we going to be credible? And so is it better to just keep it closed in and try to pretend it didn't happen and move forward with it? And it's just such a slap in the face to victims.
It really is. It really, and isn't that just absolutely disgusting how a senior archbishop clearly lied in writing about his own prayer, and he's not lying about a lost soccer ball or a stolen bicycle. He's lying about my childhood sexual assault that has affected my whole fucking life. In my story, I say I would like to tell this to Archbishop Naaman face to face at the top of my fucking lungs. Joseph, your cheap ass statute of limitations defense that you used against me and paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to use against me for 3.5 excruciating years to saddle me with blatant injustice for the rest of my life. Well, your defense, Joseph, your statute defense, that has absolutely no bearing whatsoever on what a Catholic priest actually did to me when I was 11 years old, or how it has horribly affected and infected my whole goddamn life. But of course, you don't care about that, do you, Joseph? any way you can, right, Joseph?
Well, and let's break down this other paragraph. It's the second to last paragraph. It says, "We offer assistance to victims and survivors of sexual abuse by church personnel through support and personal care, resources, and counseling. If you would like assistance, please contact our victim assistance coordinator." So here's how I take this. They've obviously had multiple accusations and cases to the fact that they've had to hire a counselor that assists with sexual assault abuse victims. And
Exactly. And that whole article, again, that they don't give a fuck about providing any counseling. That's all for the public and for all Catholics, because they spend, tens of millions of dollars lobbying and fighting like hell to keep the statute firmly in place. So that whole article about the Hope Services, that was so brutal for me, because they use those victims in Missouri as pawns, and they're like taking the high road when they're actually, evil as hell. I was experiencing their evilness for, at the time, 20 months while they're all righteous in the paper. That's when I pictured Catholics all over this town thinking and saying, sure, it's just terrible what happened to these poor victims, but the real moral of this dilemma is just look at the compassion of the church. And that just fucking really makes me sick, because it's the exact opposite. In my story, I said, I went to the independent review board. I said, this what wasn't their first rodeo. I wasn't their first rodeo. And then talking about how powerful they are. Okay, there was a bill in February of 2020 to do away with the statute in Topeka, Kansas, and I was going to give a speech to lawmakers in March, but it got canceled because of COVID. Well, about a week and a half ago, the sponsor of the bill, a senator named Cindy Holscher, I met with her at a Starbucks in February of 2020, and someone that was also at that meeting was the parents of another survivor from the same priest. The priest that assaulted me, he was all over the place. It was just ridiculous. So about a week and a half ago, I texted Cindy Holscher, and I said, is there any news about the bill to do away with the statute of limitations? And let me read you what she texted me back. So I texted her, "Hi, Cindy, it's Mike Foreman. Is there any news about the bill to eliminate the statute of limitations?" And she texted me back this: "There is a petition with 11,000 signatures on it that has been forwarded to the committee. The chair of the committee in the Senate is Catholic and has been trying to avoid the issue. I talked with the Senate president yesterday asking that the bill be given a hearing. I'm supposed to talk to a different committee chair next week about it." And she texted me, the chair that's trying to avoid this, who's Catholic, she texted me her contact information. And she's an attorney, and she's Catholic, and she lives in Leawood. So in the movie where I stand under that word justice that's engraved on that wall,
yeah,
I think she probably goes to that Catholic church. So as a lawmaker, she's trying to protect the largest, oldest, and most evil pedophile ring on earth. She's trying to protect them in court against future generations of lawsuits. When I was in the 5th and 6th grade, before I got transferred to the Catholic church, to the Catholic school, I played YMCA football. I was a quarterback. And it was the full deal, full pads, 11 on 11, and 5th and 6th grade, when I was a quarterback in YMCA football, I would lead the entire team in calisthenics before practice, Then I got exposed to my mom put me in the Catholic school. And see, the reason she took me to therapy is I couldn't stand this Catholic school. She'd let me out. She'd drop me out of school. I'd just go walking down the street. I couldn't stand the fucking place. So because of that, someone at the Queen of the Holy Rosary told my mom she should take me to family therapist and Catholic priest Finney and Meese. Yeah, this monster also had the title of family therapist. So that's why I went there to begin with. Well, so I'm leading, before I get exposed to this priest, I have the leadership where I'm leading an entire football team in calisthenics before practice. That was in the 5th and 6th grade. By the time I got to 10th grade, well, after this happened to me, there was no more sports. I played quarterback. I was a pitcher in Little League Baseball. Then after this happened, no more sports. And by the time I was in the 10th grade, I went from leading a football team in calisthenics in the 6th grade to the 10th grade. I was sitting in my parents' dark basement by myself, rocking back and forth for hours a day,
Your
and
childhood is
without even knowing why. There's no doubt in my mind that if this shit wouldn't happen to me, my life would have turned out completely different. I'm 95% sure I would have been married. I'd have grandkids right now. And Nauman, he even says to the victims who settled, I truly regret how deeply this has impacted your life. Well, he doesn't give a shit how it's impacted my life. It's so painful. When I read that article for the first time, oh my God, that was brutal. Because he had been going out of his way to give me as much pain as possible for, at the time, 20 months. And I could picture all these Catholics thinking, God, this Joseph Nauman, he's the real deal. Oh my God. And then, so we know how despicable Joseph Nauman is, He's actually now investigating allegations against a Catholic bishop in Dodge City, Kansas. He's investigating.
Again, I don't
I know
understand.
how
Why is he investigating anything? Why is this not just turned over to law enforcement to investigate? Not trying to say that everybody is bad, but for the love of Pete, if you are involved, if you have any connection to that organization, it is a conflict of interest. You should not be investigating.
Exactly. And that's just for face value, what you just said. But picture how that hit me, because I know from experience what an evil snake he is. And I picture Catholics going, whoa, well, we're going to get to the bottom of this shit in Dodge City because, Archbishop Nauman now is investigating. Archbishop Nauman is so evil and filthy. And he's got people in this town looking at him like he's Paul McCartney. It's just, I can't even explain how much worse that motherfucker's made this for me. And again, he acts like he's Mr. Healer, Mr. Hope Service, Mr. Law Enforcement, and he's all for the survivors. They could have told me, Mike, you're gonna lose your lawsuit. We're gonna hide behind the statute, but if you want, we will offer you the money that we've got earmarked to pay the lawyers. And they didn't. Nauman, he would rather pay despicable lawyers than someone who he knows is telling the truth. And for him to take the initiative, that's so telling. For him to take the initiative and reach out to make sure that I get nothing. And he's saying we're offering counseling. He reached out to another party to make sure I didn't get a dime for counseling. And again, I can't stress this enough. The picture in Catholics thinking that he's just so wonderful, and he's extra filthy.
It is brutal. And to kind of shift this for a minute, I can't tell you enough how much I appreciate you coming back on today and actually breaking down and dissecting the full letters with us, because I really thought that was going to be something that would really help the listeners understand where all these emotions are coming from. I can say that one thing that makes me extremely happy is the relationship that you and I have built. And when you call and tell me that you're listening to the episode that we've done together time after time after time again because it's therapy, just really brings joy to my heart. That Kiana and I can be a part of that with you.
It's like the best therapy I've ever had. It's empowering, it's unburdening, and it's just every time I listen to it, I kind of feel like I'm getting it all off my chest again.
Well, that's my goal, with this show altogether. And so I really appreciate that. And I want to kind of shift before we have to close off. I want to kind of shift to something a little bit more positive. So let's talk about, so it is award season at this time. And so tell us where and what all you've been getting as far as like the Oscars with the documentary Procession.
Well, I think everybody involved in the movie was just cautiously optimistic that we were going to get nominated, because when we went out before we were shown a Telluride, we had no idea it was going to be this it was going to be this successful. But so we got just tons of awesome reviews, just tons of them. And then they announced the Academy Award nominations on February 8th, about a week before. The LA Times and Vanity Fair magazine both released all their predictions for all categories. I guess they must do that every year. And the LA Times and the Vanity Fair both predicted that Procession would be nominated.
Oh, wow.
And then it did not get nominated. It was a huge disappointment because
But I wouldn't take it as a disappointment. I mean, of course we would want the show to be nominated and then of course win, but even to get as far as it did, to even be considered with the damn Oscars, like that alone, because isn't it called a snub list?
Yeah, we were on everybody's snub list. There was one. I love this wording. There's a magazine called, I think it's called PasteMagazine.com. And they're talking about the snubs, and they said that the movie Procession was excellent. And here's how they said this. Whoever wrote this said, maybe the reason Procession did not get nominated is because maybe the Oscar voters did not want to rock a boat that continues to need capsizing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So
I think that person's 100% on. They were afraid. They were scared.
Yeah, and as far as the Academy Award, I just wanted just a nomination would have just given us so much more exposure. But you're right, just to be considered. Say, I didn't know how this stuff worked with the Academy Awards, but the first thing you have to do is make what they call the short list. So out of this last year, there was 138 documentaries were submitted for consideration by the Academy Awards. And the first thing you have to do is you have to make what they call the short list, which is the top 15. So we made the short list of the top 15 out of 138. So what that kind of means, how I take that is we were nominated to be nominated. So we made the short list.
Even to be nominated is such a big deal.
Yeah, there was one snub list. I might have been Rolling Stone magazine. I can't remember which one it was, but I mean there were some big names that got snubbed. Lady Gaga, her movie, I think that her movie was expected to be nominated. It didn't get nominated. So we're on the list with some big name people. Right?
Absolutely.
Well, Mike, and to tell you how I feel about it, I never thought that I would be in a situation where I've developed a relationship with someone that has done what you have done with the documentary that you have done and been on a snub list of the Oscars. So if that tells you, I just think it's incredible. If someone told me that, hey, out of 138 podcasts, you're one of the top 15 and we're putting you on a snub list, I will take it and I will celebrate that all fucking day.
Yeah.
So don't let those things make you feel that it's not enough, because it is. And here's the thing, Mike, and I think I told you this before, I always like to look at the snub list and the ones that aren't nominated, because I want to, there's probably some on there that maybe I just haven't heard of. Maybe it's because it's a genre that I don't study too much, and so I pay more attention to those and broaden my horizon with that a little bit, and actually pay more attention to those than the ones that are even nominated, because I want to know why did they get that far but not all the way,
right?
And
I will also add to this is that David knows me well enough to know that I am not as into documentaries as he is into documentaries. He teases me all the time about it. But that being said, Procession impacted me so much that I was like, yes, absolutely, David, I will do this with you. That's how much that particular documentary impacted me. And I'm not one of those people who gravitates toward documentary, if that lets you know just how big and how meaningful the work that you guys did.
Yeah, absolutely.
Appreciate you saying that.
Well, and we can't thank you enough. There's no other show that I've done where I've had this many episodes on, because this is something that needs to be covered. It needs to be talked about, and who better to talk about it than with you. So I'm just so honored, and I love the relationship we built. And I really think that, as these shows are getting released, I can't wait to hear, people's opinions and thoughts on it. And so maybe we can even have you back one day on after all the shows are released, have you back to do a little Q&A where people have written in questions and comments and we discuss those with
Oh,
you.
I'd love to do that. One thing for me that's it's kind of unusual, I think is when I did those two stories on the local TV here and then the movie and I got my website. I've braced myself and I've been expecting, negative emails, from trolls or whatever. I have not gotten one negative email, not one. Richard Pryor would say it's enough to make you great.
I think that is a brilliant way to end, Mike.
Very grateful you guys reached out. I'm glad to be doing these podcasts. Hopefully, maybe one of Oprah's underlings will hear this or something. Right?
That would be great for all of us.
Perfect.
Thank you all for listening to another episode of Surviving Abuse Podcast. I'm so thankful to have Kiana and Mike with us today. I just think there's so much to discuss with Mike about what he's been through in this documentary and the changes that are in the works. There is definitely more to come. Please like, share, comment, all those things on all the social medias. We appreciate you guys and we will talk soon. Bye.
Kissing the back goodbye.